Please welcome to the stage, Tracey Segarra!
So it's so funny that there was a Sesame Street story because I worked there right out of college, and I actually got to see Jim Henson doing Kermit at the studio. So that's a great memory that I have. But my story's about something totally different. So at 34 years old, there are two things that I want more than anything else in the world. And that's to marry the man I love and to have my father be by my side to walk me down the aisle. Now, the first one's going just great. Found the guy. The wedding is set for 6 months from now. Beautiful outdoor wedding. The second one's a bit of a problem, though, because my father is currently sitting in a jail cell in the Bronx. It's for contempt of court. My parents' divorce is incredibly nasty. I'm not even sure what it's all about. It's about money, and he's skipping town. But anyway, so he's in this jail cell in the Bronx. And so he's in this jail cell in the Bronx. And so that's why I am here, sitting here in the visitor's room. And I'm here with my brother. And we have also invited my mother. Now, this woman hates this man with the heat of 1,000 suns. But she has decided to come here. She's agreed to come here. And my brother and I both think that she had something to do with my father being here. But even so, she's agreed to be here. So, my father. My father is this handsome, charming salesman, gambler, and a con man. He looks like Robert Reed from the Brady Bunch, any of you are old enough to remember. He's got this dark curly hair and a mustache. He is charming. He will do anything to make you laugh, and he's generous to a fault. My sister once described him perfectly. He's the kind of guy who'll give you the shirt off his back and then a week later shake you down for money to buy a new shirt. That's my dad. But when I was a kid, my dad was just my everything. My mother was a teacher and had to get to work early every day, so it was my father who would pour my honeycombs, get me ready for school. He was there when I won second prize at the gymnastics competition. And when I was older, but not quite old enough to drink yet, he bought me my first whiskey sour. My mother was the disciplinarian, the enforcer, the parent who rarely said yes. My father slipped me 20s behind her back and could never say no. So naturally, I grew up adoring him. But about 10 years earlier, when I was about 25 and already living outside of the house, my father one day, while my mother was at work, he packed up all his belongings from the 33 years of marriage in the Upper East Side co-op where they lived together, and he put one of those rolling carts, and he rolled it up the block to move in with the B-movie actress who he had met while walking the dog. And after that, I rarely saw him. The one time I agreed to see him, he wanted me to meet his new girlfriend. So we go to this brownstone, and this woman, she was a B-movie actress, and then she turned into a vitamin entrepreneur. And I walk into this brownstone, and I am greeted by this life-size cardboard cutout of her wearing a bikini made entirely of vitamin E capsules. But after that, my father really makes no effort to stay in touch with me. And honestly, at the time, I tell myself that I am so angry with how he left my mother, and I'm just like, whatever, go, live your life. I don't care. But really inside, it devastated me. But over time, I realized that, you know what? He was not the one I could count on. He was really not there for me in the way that my mother was. And my mother was always the one who would call and make plans, and we'd put him on the phone. And my father really wasn't all that generous when I thought about it, because he had me co-sign a loan for the apartment that I was living in after college, and he defaulted on that loan, ruining my credit for the next 7 years. But now that I'm getting married, just none of that seems to matter. And for some reason, I just feel this intense need to have my father be there by my side at my wedding. I mean, he's the first man I ever loved. So here we are, sitting in the Bronx House of Detention. My father is there in his orange jumpsuit. My mother is sitting there. My brother's there. And the conversation around the table is really awkward and uncomfortable. And then we get to my mother. And my mother looks at my father and she says, Bob, you're a liar and a cheat, and you have nobody but yourself to blame for being here. That went well. And when we get out of the jail, I am just so upset about my wedding and my father being there, and he looks so horrible. And I just turn on my mother and I say, you know what? I know you say you have nothing to do with him being there, but if he's still in that jail cell and he's not at my wedding, I am never going to forgive you. And she pleads innocence, that she had nothing to do with it. And we just go our separate ways, and I continue planning this wedding that I've been planning since I'm 5 years old. But every week that passes, my father's still sitting in that jail cell, I get more and more nervous and afraid that he's not going to be at my wedding. About 2 weeks before my wedding, I hear that my father is out of jail, and I'm not even sure how it happened, but I don't know if it was my brother or one of my sisters calls me, he's out. And I call him right away. And I say, Dad, I'm so glad you're out. You'll come to the wedding, right? And my father says, Tracy, why didn't you invite Nora? Nora's the B-movie actress turned vitamin entrepreneur. And I say, Dad, I can't. I just can't. I can't stand her. And however I feel about my mother, I'm not going to parade this woman in front of my mother at my wedding. And so I say, Dad, I just can't. And he says, okay. He goes, I'll be there. It is now the night before my lakeside outdoor wedding. And the weatherman is predicting rain. And it cannot rain on my wedding day, not just because I'm bridezilla, because I am, but because I have no contingency plans. I'm a terrible wedding planner. I've got no tent, no nothing. We could be like getting married by this lake in the pouring rain. So I go to sleep, and I am filled with trepidation and anxious about the next day. Well, I wake up the next morning in my bed and breakfast, and I carefully pull aside the curtain, and I see the sun starting to rise, and I think, okay, good omen. And I start to get dressed for this day I've been planning ever since I was a little girl. And I have my something old, which is my grandmother's beaded purse. I have my something new, which is my beautiful princess wedding gown. I have my something blue. I've painted my toenails blue for the wedding. And I have my something borrowed, which are my gorgeous diamonds and pearl Tiffany earrings. And they are borrowed because I carefully checked Tiffany's return policy before purchasing them. And they are going back to Tiffany's right after the wedding. And I head over to the lake. And when I get to the lake, I see my fiancé looking handsome in his tuxedo down by the lake, by the chuppah, and I see my mother and my sisters and my guests in the white wedding chairs. And he's not there. My dad is not there. And I get so fucking angry, and I'm like, I cannot believe he's gonna ruin my wedding. He's obviously still angry at me that I didn't invite Nora. And then I say, no. I am not going to let him ruin this day. My brother will walk me down the aisle. It will be fine. But where's my brother? I don't see him either. And I am turning all around until finally I look way behind me, and then up there on the hill by a tree is my brother. And standing next to him, looking incredibly uncomfortable in an ill-fitting tuxedo, is my dad. And I run over to him and I give him a big hug and I say, Dad, I am so glad you're here. And he says, Tracy, of course I'm here. And with my father on my left side and my mother on my right, the closest they've been in many years, I walked down the aisle and I married the man I love. Later on at the reception, though, about 90% of the wedding guests, mostly my mother's friends and relatives, totally ignore my father, won't even look him in the eye. He is a pariah, but he's there. And when we dance the father-daughter dance to sunrise, sunset, he smoothly glides me around that floor. And for the first time in, I don't even remember, he gives me his complete attention. And it's a beautiful, beautiful day. Later on, though, a few weeks later, I learned that this day could have gone so much differently. Apparently, my father calls my brother the night before the wedding, and he says, Gordon, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to Tracy's wedding. Nora's given me an ultimatum. If I go to the wedding, she's going to kick me out. Tracy will understand. And my brother, who is the hero of this story, says, I cannot believe we are even having this conversation. No, she will not understand. If you don't go to this wedding, this is going to be the biggest mistake you have ever made in your life. And Dad, you have made a lot of mistakes in your life. And he tells me about waiting at the train station that morning, wondering whether my father was going to get off that train. And then later, when my father heads back to the city, Nora made good on her promise, and all of his belongings are in garbage bags by the curb. And he spends the next few months on my brother's couch until she eventually takes him back. You know, when my father left my mother 10 years earlier, I remember thinking, how do you just choose to stop loving somebody? And whether he chose to stop loving me that day, too. Listen, my father has never been the most perfect dad, the most honest or reliable one. And looking back, yeah, I'm sure he deserved to be sitting in that jail cell in the Bronx. But on a sunny day in June, when it was supposed to rain, and he had so much to lose, he made sure I knew that I was loved. He's my dad. Of course he did.